I was going to talk about a topic 80, pleasant but bitter. All right? Pleasant but bitter. Because most of the time, we look pleasant. We are pleasant on the outside, but bitter on the inside. And abona bantu who get exposed to that bitterness, abantu aba close to us, especially thina bantu bangamaKrestu, we have that, and thina bantu bangotata, we have that challenge. We'll see if we cannot link the two, but for now, I just want to talk about our default settings or response. Uba umzekelo, Oscar is here, and then I step him on the foot. It default response yakhe iyenzeka even before acinge what to do. One time we were at church in another town, so it was a xesha lemthandazo. People were coming forward for the word of prayer and that worship. So it so happened that one of the deaconesses, umdikonkazi, wayephaya ngaphambili, and someone wamnyathela. Yo, watsho ngesithuko esinjani umdikonkazi? Sabatha, get divine service. That was a default response. Yena xa enyathelwe umdikonkazi urespondela hlobo umthetho wakhe. That's a different. So as men, we also have certain default responses. Today we look at them. We'll use the story of Abraham and Isaac. And for those people who, and I've been reading this because I have this challenge. She was not supposed to hear some of these confessions because I sometimes find myself default response kuye and I should not be having it. So as men, I think sinai a challenge of not really looking at this thing. So if you look at the book of Genesis chapter 12, and then you also read the book of Genesis chapter 26. Prior there are two stories. In 12, there's a story of Abraham when Abraham was faced with a situation where he had to lie and deceive about his wife. Do you remember that? What sister work? Because if you read the story, you get a sense that Abraham, this thing really was about saving his skin, and in the process exposing the wife. And the wife was taken by Pharaoh. It just so happened that uThixo wangenelela ngesakhe isandla, such that nothing happened to her, but anything could have happened to her. Now, if you go to chapter 26 of the same book, the same thing that the father did, the son did. So, Isaac is now an older man, and is married. And they go to the same place. It's another king now, it's another Pharaoh. Pagu chapter 26. And then the same thing happens. And the wife is taken, Rebecca. And Abimelech, who was the king at the time, realized that hey, something happened nakuye. God intervened. Realized that hey, this man He's a husband to this. Uthi kuye, why did you not tell me? So, this means the way that we respond to situations under pressure, ayipheleli kuthi sedwa. It can also go to our children and generations to generations after generation. Now, the question is, do we know our default responses to situations when we are under pressure? How are we in those situations? Nasithethe ngalondo today. Because ke ndibona pha kum nami uba hey dinayo ingxaki yalento. Now, they were fearing for their lives in a foreign land. Bayesaba because, but you see, irresponse yabo, it come from the place of selfishness. To preserve him, because unalando iti, hey, uba kunofunyanisa ukuthi inkosikazi yami le, maybe this guy can kill me and take over. And abiyavakala na so far. So now, as gentlemen, we need to look into this. When we do things, what is the motivation for us to respond the way that we do? The way that we respond and do things, is it because we're driven by our selfishness and selfish needs? Because sibona tina a deception on both of these people, in lying, dishonesty. And in the process, someone is suffering. In other words, the nkosikazi. Now, it's very important ke into bangaba ezinto ke sihlale sizinqokole. And abantu bobabini, it's not like ingabantu who are not godly. They are godly. So this means that even those of us abakhonzayo are susceptible basi benale problem until uThixo asincede. Because singabantu sinayo by nature into your protector and preserving ourselves. And sinida uThixo to take that out. Especially if we are having families, we have other people that were in our lives, either emsebenzini, ekhaya, enkonzweni, emsebenzini. It means that we have to really be able to monitor how is our default response to situations. Because uyakwazi ukuresponda ungaqondanga ungacinganga because uqhele ukwenza ngolhlobo njengala sisi lo wathukayo emzweni. So it's an issue that we need to look, maybe we need to learn from his stories ka Abraham. You don't have to be ungodly to be driven by selfishness. I don't know if I'm making sense or not. You don't have to be umntu ongakhonziyo. Because uAbraham yakhumbula uThixo wathini ngaye. Wathi, this man is a man of faith. Oh. Yebo. Hey, I can't see God. Say. Yes.
In the situation that was particularly with the two that you just mentioned now.
Yes.
Was it not fear that made them to learn in order to be accepted?
Okay. Uchoke, utati yabuza, is it not fear? Is it really selfishness? I think impendulo sizazifumana apha. Yes, you can say that by what, but where does the fear come from? Because most of the time, God says we need to replace, I think in the Bible there are 365 verses that talks about do not fear, have faith. Because the problem, once we have no faith, we're going to rely on the fear. And then normally, when we are so scared, we go inside. And so what they did not have, because we must remember, in Abraham, for him to be here, he has been brought here by God. So if he had faith in that moment, the fear would not have existed. So because he had fear, then he had to look at the source of that fear, which was selfishness, self-preservation, self-protection. So we need to have more faith in God when we are doing these things. But I'm sure sizaphinda sibuye size kule question, because it's a valid question. Now, abanye abantu, when we are corrected, we try and defend. We're using a defense mechanism. Mhlawumbe uyacorrectwa endlini inkosikazi, okanye ngumntwana, okanye mhlawumbe it's a family member. When we are corrected, we also use, it's not just when we are fearful, but sometimes when a person tells us, what you are doing is not, I sometimes find it in myself. I find it a lot. All right? I find it a lot. You know, she would say something, hey, lendo ngolhlobo nolhlobo. Kuba ke ndinalantu bandima indoda apha. But when you think really about it, this person was correct, but I was using my gender, using my power, whatever it is, my defensive mechanisms, to actually kill that thing. When we are corrected, we use defensive mechanisms. This is where it grows to becoming a narcissistic behavior. Because abantu who have been declared as narcissistic, abantu who do not see anything wrong, everything is right with them, but everything is wrong with you. Such that kukhona abantu who ingqondo zabo ziyaqhawuka, because lo muntu lona there's a story that happened one time in Kunzweni. I won't say where. So this guy is teaching a Sabbath school lesson on a Sabbath day. Teaching a Sabbath school lesson, and then xa ifundisa i-Sabbath school lesson, yazi amaSabbatha mos xa ifundisa lesson, Ellen White uthi, yibona hey lo mfo is right in there. So pa in the middle, a hand was like this, phakamile isandla. Hey, this guy is not recognizing this hand. Lo sisi uphakamise isandla aphakama mengenyawo. Hey, ati no, xolo bandla, sorry, I don't want to, but I can't let this go. You know this guy, this is my husband. Uchodosis. The last time, le suit I don't know, isuit yakhe, I ironed it last night, yesterday, preparing to church. Recently, isuit yakhe, and I don't know, but when he was leaving endlini, emsebenzini, I don't know where he got this nothing, but now uzofundisa lesson up. So what then happened is that the elders quickly met with them, and the guy says, I know, unkosikazi wami akaphilanga, she's not okay. Uyathanda uba nedrama unje, akakho right. So, hey, lo sisi now nguyo wrong, literally. Uti no, akakho right. I think sometimes ipilisi zakhe akase, you know, so cela abadala bamthandazela. So yaba nguye umuntu who's in charge of the situation, but you know, just to take care of my wife. She's not okay. So abanye abantu nyani ziyaqhawuka nyani ingqondo, because hey, there must be something wrong with me. But that woman was telling the truth. But this is where the situation is. when we become defensive and not want to be corrected and not want to be told. Sometimes one of the strategies, one of the feeling, if we beke ngonye uhlobo, if we beke kanje, kambiza vakala betel, you know. And but sometimes usicingela uwethu konba yazi kodwa ebenyanisile, let alone indlela le approach le azengayo. So we need to work on this response esibanayo all the time so that we can become better people. The story of Abraham. Oh, okay. Yeah. I don't know where to stand. Did I write up on it? Okay. Defensiveness, denial, anger. These are ways that as a responder ngayo automatically, and the more we use that muscle, the more it's going to be like that at all the time. Such that umtu lona who's giving the correction no longer feels motivated to do it. Because xa eyenza mna ndiresponda ngohlobo oluthile. Sometimes the avoidance. Konde knows I'm avoidable. Ignore that person. All right? But it does not help the situation between our band. In relationships, like family relationships, in situations of our lives, where when I was the HR department, oh, I law defensive. Because I promote to a band, no, stay away from that. That person is always deflecting. It's always you get this label as a person who is not able to learn and grow from being corrected. So our default positions are things that we need to constantly think about and change and constantly recalibrate, because ziyakwazi usenza sibe ngabantu abazizidodo okanye ziyakwazi usenza sibe ngabantu who grow and become better people. Sometimes uthi omnye umbhali, a modern man's default response might be shutting down conversation to avoid shame. Ngoba ngoku xa kuthethwa ngalento ungathi wena uba ashamed. You'd rather shut it down rather than taking and speaking about it. And it's a problem that we're finding ourselves. Abanye abantu justify the wrong action rather than taking the responsibility for this thing get wrong. And by the way, lento ingenzeka on both sides. It's not a male problem. Iyenzeka on both sides. But today sithetha phakathi kodade. Fumanisa ukuthi lo muntu akafuna uthatha responsibility. Akafuna uthatha uxanduva of correcting okanye mhlawumbe of addressing whatever is at hand. Omnye ublame abanye abantu. Blame is another thing. Blame game. Everything is another person. Everything is about other people. It's a blame game all the time. These are things that make us pleasant here at church. But these are the things that we use to make lives bitter in our privacies. Because prior with those people that are close to us, we're using these things to make their lives bitter. Such that omnye umda decide into good to know, I don't want to have anything to do. I'll just keep quiet. I won't correct. I won't do anything. And unfortunately, yindlela esingayo le. Ukona omnye udoctor, just forget his name. Oh, sorry, Sisi. Okay, yeah. You know, kaba wayokwenza i-PhD, ungumntu othanda incwadi uhleli nje uyafunda yathini. So inkosikazi yakhe babesebe nabantwana abancinci. So as part of the PhD program, he needed ba ahleli nje akekho endlini doing this and that and that. So inkosikazi would complain about his lack of availability. And into yoba unabantwana abayi two girls that were growing. And so, but this man was never there, and in his eyes, unalando iti, once digqibe le degree ndiyenzayo, we're going to make life like better for all of us. I'm going to make sure we make up for all of that time. But the woman was a homemaker, esekhaya. And so life yakhe was just abantwana, diapers, yonke nje isiphithiphithi, niyabona. So uthi ke one time umntana wakhe lo mdala intombazana comes from school ephethe i-drawing, caba bekuthiwa esikolweni they must draw their family. So abuye umntana ephethe edrawishile ke abantu abayi-3, umama naye no sister wakhe. Uyabuza ngoku utata ukuthi hey man uphi utata kule picture, yabona athi umntana utata daddy is at a study, at a lab or studying, so he's not there. And on that day he felt ukuthi hey I must do something, but izinto zaphinda zathi catch up wayilibala lanto. So inkosikazi yakhe ngoku uyabalisa ibali loba uthi one time she was mopping, not mopping, what is that? Did you hoover, vacuum? Yeah. And lapha caba apha lento isengqondweni yakhe, this thing yenzekayo just in her family, you know. And uthi when she one time switched off the button of this hoover or this vacuum cleaner, she felt her heart closing to her husband. She felt numb towards him, such that she no longer cared about what she said or what he did or what she didn't care anymore. And yena akayazi londo, you know, but yena in her heart she had switched off her emotion towards him. And so xa efika, he got the same things, ukutya, this and that, but the heart was no longer there. Now this is another issue that they found to show in Yobangaba. The more abantu bekhula in their careers, the more sometimes, I'm not talking about marital relationships. The more there is a thing that happens, a separation that happens between them and the other people, abalapha endlini, and even abanye abantu around, because this one uyakhula and uyebheka phambili, and if that person okhulayo is not considerate about, because xa ukhula you are in that mode of doing this and doing that and doing that, moving from there, moving to there, you forget other important things. And so in that case, that guy decided to go to know, I must go back home. The doctorate can pause for a while, because ndizayigqiba le doctorate, nale mali ndithi ndizawuyenza, by the time ndiyenza, there may not be anyone to do it with. All of these are forms of the effect of moving into a certain pattern of thought, which is a default response or default setting. Ebangela into yokubangaba ube concerned only about yourself. And unfortunately, the corporate world and the world out there rewards that behavior. Yento yokubangaba ujongane nesiqu sakho of your own growth and so on. That is where the challenge is. And these are parts, are things that we need to learn from the story of Abraham kunye no Isaac. As much as they were scared, but that fear exposed a deeper problem. It exposed a deeper reliance on their own plans to deal with the problem. Because Abraham, let me pray about this problem. Let me consult to Tico, because remember, if you read the story, when Abraham left his home, it was God who came to him. What Abraham, leave and go to where I will lead you. So if he had been faithful to that, he would not have needed to lie about the wife. I don't know if I'm making sense or not. So I've counted a number of things: the defensiveness, anger, lack of humility, not being willing to be corrected. These are the default settings. And I know from myself, from my personal experience, Uguti, these are challenges that I have. That sometimes abanye abantu are even using blame games to blame the other person on correct eye, because we don't want to be corrected. We don't want. Ubabona nesermon ezitrendayo apho ko social media ezixoxisayo apha eSabatha kakhulu. Zezi zilungisayo isimilo. Hey wathi ubona ba hey abantu abafunda safuna uxelelwa ngoku izinto esizenzayo. You know, it's because we are moving into a world that thrives on selfishness, individualism. You know, inkonzo yethu, if you read our manual, for example, for those of us, including the elders manual, you will find there a disciplinary code and disciplinary hearing. Now that disciplinary process was premised acting. The one who is from the church and the one who is here for whatever reason are both Christian. That's the assumption. Such that in the old days, in the past, when a guy would impregnate a lady in church, ebezibizela ngokwakhe azothi hey ndenze this thing, to admit into yobanga hey I've made a mistake here. Now kufuneka inkonzo is an evidence. Show me the evidence. Were you there? Show us the evidence. So we have moved away from being selfless to being open to correction, open to advice, humble for other people to actually guide us. We are now relying so much on default settings as is entrenched away from what God wants, but to what God does not want. In this instance, in both these instances, uThixo wangenelela. And then Abraham, after the thing, if you read the story, he went to Jericho and he did an altar and he asked God for forgiveness, because he knew that the reason why he responded that way, it was because he had left the parameters of God's guidance. He was now leading his own life. And so when we operate outside of God's parameters, it's very, very easy for us to be led astray. And then can ndinikezele abantu bakhe bathethe. James chapter 4 verse 10 says, humble yourself or yourselves before the Lord, and he will lift you up. Actually, the rest of it says, at the right time, he will lift you up. Okay. And then Ellen White, Oti Apa, true humility is not thinking less of yourself. It is thinking of yourself less. Aiti, you are less when as a person. But the amount of time that you spend thinking about yourself in responding to situation is reduced. The unfortunate part in both these stories is that uloyiko labo, their fear, did not lead them to God. Their fear led them to selfishness. That is where the problem is. So we are not going to be in situations where we are not scared. The question is, what do we do when we are scared? Which way do we go? Do we try and find and figure out our own ways, which may be outside of God's, or do we say, okay, Nkosi, ndiyoyika, but lead me. Nkosi, I'm scared, but lead me. So this is the core of the message today. We need to develop a humble spirit and a growth mindset. That mindset, I will need to constantly grow in being a better Christian and being a better person, a better husband, a better this and a better that. And a humble spirit is not weakness, but strength under control. Moses was meek, but Moses was not weak. Those are two things. We can be meek and yet strong. But unfortunately, we misunderstand this. So let me pause there because I want to transition to this other thing I wanted to talk to about. I'm looking at the time. And check, are there comments, are there disagreements, are there concerns? Okay, just a discussion before we move. Yes, there's a hand there. Yes, yes. Ladies are allowed. It's your day, Namhlanje.
Thank you for the permission to ask a question. It's not really a question. It's around the. Yes, hello.
Yes.
Thank you very much. It's around. We're making an example regarding a guy who was doing his PhD, right, and that had taken so much of his time that he had realized that he had to stop so that he could spend a bit more time with his family. So rather gain the family, pause the dream and come back to it later. And you went on to speak on the whole idea of sometimes of us getting consumed by self and selfishness and pursuing certain things and whatnot. I'm just asking, as a young person, would you advise maybe rather that people marry later once they've accomplished most of their things? Can these things, I know this is not a marriage seminar that we are having, but you're putting this in the context of a man in a family setup and how it's all affecting the family. And I was wondering if the same scenario was given to a mother in a marriage now, where she was the one who was not present and she was the one pursuing all of these big dreams and whatnot. Rather, is it not better then maybe that people marry later, that they accomplish what they want to first, then settle down with others? Or is there room in marriage for others to grow when they have others besides them? Or is it just at the same time a situation where when you marry, you now have to let go of any dream or goal that you had for yourself? Because whatever you do, it always takes away from something. If it's not taking away from the family, it's taking away from the church time. If it's not taking away from the church time, it's taking away from the responsibilities that you have towards the community, the church at large, and so on. So I'm just wondering, it's a thought that's just crossing my mind because we are engaging in this conversation with colleagues, and I said to them, maybe rather why can't we just pause a bit and maybe have marriage after you're 38, you're 39, get all of these things first, and then in your 40s and start building families rather than you putting people through all of this, because it seems like selfishness is fine, but he deserves to get his PhD as well. I don't know, how do we now balance all of that?
Okay, it's a difficult question. Is there one who wants to give maybe an answer to that whilst I'm trying to think about what to say? Yeah, but I think Unyansi, oh, okay, there's someone who wants to say something.
and hasn't itata. Yeah, it is a difficult question, but I think what you are raising here is that we need to be conscious about these things. These are things that happen. You mentioned about these default settings or default responses. If you're not aware, bakwizinto ozenza without you even thinking, ozenza by default, when they happen, abanye abantu bekuxelela, you won't know. And if you're conscious about it, then at least uyakwazi mhlambe ungabi as defensive as you would. Coming to question Kamabongs, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer in this one, because if, let's say, you want to pursue, as an example, a PhD, we call from metric, you do your undergrad, you do your postgrad, you do your masters, and then you do your PhD. It's possible, but by the time ugqiba, I don't know how long it will take you, but by the time ugqiba, you could be in your late 30s, you could be in your 40s, I don't know, because sometimes you may not complete them at record time. You are failure, or you're taking longer, to submit your papers are just taking longer, and you are in a situation where by the time you are now ready to get married, guys or ladies are no longer available, you know, and that is a reality that you could be faced with. In Dogbana now, abantu have already been taken, and now you are in a situation where you are frustrated because akuseko pool of people that are available for when, and also sebekhona, they are not the caliber of the people that you are able to converse with, you are able to have a meaningful relationship kunye nabo. Mhlawumbe abanye they are at a lower standard than the upward mobility that you have pushed yourself to. So kuko nalo challenge. So what I would say mna is that, one, we need to be conscious about it. We need ukuthi, if you've got people, family, where you are pursuing whatever field, it doesn't have to be education, by the way. It could be sports, it could be all these things, but be mindful of the people you are living with. I think that's the message in the Vayo. Let us be mindful of the people that we have around us, so that as much as you are growing in the marriage setting, give the other people a chance also that they grow. Ingabingwe to look clever or busy, the PhDs and honors and everything. Ungoskazi wako apa akafumani chance. Sometimes kaukume suspend your courses, ukumnika nayo memo kanyuna ntsika utati chance naye akabu at least nibe kwi almost the same level. All right, ngosi tisha.
Yeah. Ukonomye. Okay, we'll give that hand.
Good afternoon, Church.
Hi, good afternoon.
My point has been taken. That's what I wanted to say. I think the solution, proposed solution, firstly, maybe to your scenario that you used of the PhD human being. I think we have to make a conscious decision to be part of the people who are in our lives, whatever the situation. But now, here's another additional thing that we have that we're not aware. It's golden. As an Adventist person, whether pursuing a PhD or not, the assumption is at 7 o'clock, you are sitting with your family and you guys are praying. So So when the kids draw these drawings, as much as dad is always at the lab, if dad is back by 7 o'clock, I promise you, the child is going to draw dad sitting at the sofa holding the Bible, because that's what we have. What I have learned now at work, which is very sad, kids don't know what is a family. They have no idea. You ask them to draw their family, like, but which one? And you're like, what do you mean which one? Should I draw my step-dad or my step-siblings? And you're like, so what, according to you, what is a family? They have no idea. They don't know. And it's not their fault. It's because we don't know what we want in our families. So the solution is, we need to be cognizant of what we want and then be realistic of the relations in our life. And I'm not for the idea of suspending a PhD. I am for the idea of making a decision in your PhD how you're going to be in your family. If you decide for your PhD that I'm reserving the 7 o'clock holy time or whatever time you guys pray to be with my family, make it a family time. Make sure that your kids are aware you are there. Listen to how their day was. And if it takes an hour, I don't think an hour can really cost your PhD. That's my personal, I don't have a PhD, I don't know. But if you use that 1 hour to firstly have a family prayer, at my house where I come from 7 to 9, it's family time. Call anyone at my house between that time. You will not get hold of any of us. Okay, I'm not at home anymore. But when I grow up and I sit in spaces where parents don't have time for their families. When kids draw their mummies, they say to me, she's knocking off late. They don't have them in the picture. Because if mom knocks off late, she comes back, the child is asleep. And sometimes it's a thing of, the mom has to work to be able to afford the school fees. But what happens to the child? Who is training your child? Because they become things. Parents get shocked. You sit with them and ask them a simple question. What are your child's strengths? They look at you like, what are you asking me? No, what is your child good at? Question 2, what do you enjoy doing with your child? They have no idea. There's nothing they enjoy. They don't know anything that they do with their kids. They don't. So my point is, we need to make a conscious decision to have the people in our lives. If you have friends, make time, yes. That's I'm not saying suspend PhDs, I'm saying make time in the PhD.
All right, thank you so much for Ezampendulo. Maybe it's a discussion for another time. Maybe this one on its own. But I think to also try and to add Kwezinto's Tetwe so far is that I think the main thing about when to get married is when you are matured. Other people mature differently. When you are matured, in other words, the maturity enables you to be able to speak and say, these are my plans, these are my things, and we can move forward. So I don't think there's a clear answer to say postpone or not postpone. But the thing is this, there are consequences on both. But if we can, along the way, try and give each other a chance to grow, it is it. But the main thing which I wanted to talk about, we need to be aware of our reaction and responses so that we are not defensive, we are not blaming, we are not always angry. We are not, we assess how we are responding to things. It's very important. But I also need to say that it is important for us men to be growth orientated, to grow all the time. And I'm not saying in comparison with the wife or the spouse or any, but I'm saying we need to be people who are growing all the time. We cannot afford to be static. We need to always grow. Men have got to prioritize personal, professional growth and make sure you grow not in order to leave your family or to look down upon the family, to grow in order to add more value. I don't know if I'm making sense. Because the more you learn, the more value you have. You can even be promoted. But when you are promoted, you are not saying, hey, mandi ambenaba ngokuba pha boardroom. Uyazi ba kukho ama-lady phaa boardroom. Kweza ndawo zipha phezulu nakweza party. Angakubangela into yobana ulibala ukuthi you are here to get resources to plant back at home. Ubone sewuhamba nezingcondo zibheka phaa. Don't want that. Lumkela eza ngcondo. Nala mehlo aphothwe yathwe yonke laa nto. Lumkela. Thijepu nje the umhle sisi udlule. Ngoba ungazibhaqa sewuthe gabhu entweni ongayicinganga. All right, because there is always a challenge to men's growth path. Xa indoda izimisela ukuthi now I'm growing, I'm making my way forward, there's always going to be something that is going to shut you down. And we need to support each other's growth as men. Xa le ndoda in a business of kwenza imoto, lungisa imoto, and I have an opportunity yoba ndimoshakalo le moto, let me take it to him and say to him, fonini kandenzele le moto. Now he must be honest and be excellent at what he's doing, so that singagxekana apha enkonzweni, because apha amasabatha awafuni noqeshana emsebenzini. You know that? I don't want any Adventists to come and work with me. Not because of anything, but because of the problems that you're going to get with them. Kafunu zemsebenzini. Ulate. On a Monday, there's an example. Friday, go 11. Uthi ufuna uyolungiselela isabatha yena. Kwa ngo 11 kusasa. Okay? People do not want to. So, but the point I'm trying to make is that we need to support one another. And we need to know what areas of support each we need, so that we can be able to withstand these default settings. Because xa une problem of exposing yourself to other people's growth, neyakho growth izawuba stunted. Kade ndiyavuya ukubona man. Ya mhlobo wami uthe uyeza la ufikile unenyani boy. Unenyani mfowami wami. Yeah. Now, I just want to say a few things because of it on this issue of pleasant but bitter, and we need to be careful of that. If you read the book of 2 Kings, chapter 19, chapter 2, verse 19, Uti, and I'm going to read it, and you can get home with Fundekai, because you're trapped in this thing. Then the men of the city said to Elisha, please notice, the situation in this city is pleasant, but the water is bad, and the ground barren. Now, I want, kukhona lanto kuthiwa ngesixhosa sisimntwiso, or personification. I want to personify this text to say that the place in Jericho was pleasant to the eye. It was pleasant physically, you could see. The water is there. It's not that there is no water. The water is there, and the environment. Actually, when you read about this from the SDA Bible commentary, it says, compared with the desolate regions around about, the situation of Jericho was indeed pleasant. Here was the wilderness of Judah, a dry, barren waste, with the sun beating up against the earth. At the time of the entrance into Canaan, life-giving springs had preserved the verdant place in a portion of the desolate valley. Yonke indawo lena it's desert, but le it was pleasant. Uyandibona mos ndinxibe kahle. I'm pleasant. Ndinxibe kahle. Ke nacheba nocheba. You know, athi. Sometimes we sometimes we spend a lot of time and money and resources on that. But the verse there says, but the water was bitter. and the land was barren. So what it means is that we must not just focus on appearing as a good couple, together, wearing the nice clothes. Or if you are not married, there's a problem between you and your children and your family. That is not being addressed. You look pleasant when you come to church, but there's something bitter about your life. There's something barren about your life. In other words, I'm not growing in the areas of life that are important. There's bitterness, there's a bad taste about me. When I speak, I do not get life. When I do things, I always mess up izinto. We need to avoid that as gentlemen. Yes, we need to look after ourselves. Sibaleke uthe umzo uzayobaleka tomorrow. We need to look after our health. Sibaleke senze zonke izinto. But sometimes some of the healthiest people, those people that subscribe to the health message, are the worst to live with. Some of us who subscribe to the health message, and not just health message, but yonke nje belief, but sometimes you are the worst to live with. Yazi, I learned a lesson, sad one. Soon after I got married, ndiyayilibala linantsika yakho bona. Ndiyathanda usibalisa esi story. Ngeli xesha ndizawutshata ndiye ndaguquka because ndikhulela apha eSabatha ndingomnye wabafana abamoshayo. So ke ndaguquka. I accepted Christ for the second time. I got baptized. And I decided to read the Bible and the Spirit of Prophecy. I would read those books. And so I got married. Nkosikazi. Sihlala soyi-2. So, esebenza nami ndisebenza, but I would notice, hey, xa sibuya enkonzweni, yeka sibuya Friday, uphekela for isapha plus na for inkonzo, ne? Uba, hey, kukhona la text ka Ellen White ithi, God, the edges of the Sabbath. God, the edges of the Sabbath. Adventist home. And so I would check, but hey, akandabona nje imbiza. Abona kwi Sabbath school lesson. Yakuchazela ixesha phale ilanga litshona nini. Ndijonga pha. Ndijonga edges of the Sabbath. Ndingutata welikhaya. I want to make sure bakuthe tse akho mntu uphuma ecaleni. Hey! Ndiqaphela into yobana Friday, hey, i-edges of the Sabbath ingathi khange zirecognize apha. Hayi, kweli Sabbath ezilandelayo, phela ngicima isitofu. Sikazi siye enkonzweni. Sasingena inkonzo ke Friday sivula iSabatha. So caba ke hey iyamhlupha lento usisi. Phakathi. Qha ndime ku-Spirit of Prophecy neBhayibhile. Ndithi apha kwa Kulati kwenziwa ngohlobo. One time one biza athi hey mienam yayiva masiqanisithi mienam biza kamandi uyandipholisa yandithambisa. Hey ndiqonda uyaphi qha ndimamela athi hey bona nje I appreciate the fact that we are cooler spiritually. You read and you know you are very deep into the Bible and the Spirit of Prophecy. Kona thiza ndiyenyuka ndenjenje ngoku ndiva hey ndiyakhakhamela. Do not expect the uppercut punch eyayizawufika. Wathi ke hey kodwa man, the more you do these things, the harder it is to live with you. Yo kwathi nyaka la response ebona la kwathi nyaka bayilo mfazi ngathi akaguqukanga. Kana Thixo ncam. Nyaka lamsindwana hey ngo hey kunethi manje umthandazele because ingathi ulahlekile. Yabo but uThixo spoke to me ukuthi your wife is telling the truth that you are not living what you are saying you are studying. You are not portraying the character that you are saying you are studying. kaThixo. So you are hard to live with. And she's not saying that the Sabbath breaking is right. But what she's saying, the way I was dealing with her was not Christian. And I think that was the best thing that ever happened to me. Because it told me ukuthi I was pleasant. Because xa ndingena enkonzweni ndibona ndihamba nenkosikazi abantu balalana ba hey, this guy is committed. But in her heart she was bitter because of what I was feeding to her. And so we need to make sure as brothers that we deal with that bitterness. You may be angry because of your upbringing. You may have issues because of whatever happened in your life. You need to ask God and get medical or psychological help to able so that we can be pleasant both outside and inside. We want to get up in Kunzwen. There are three things that are respected. Number one is doing what I'm doing now. Speaking, teaching, and preaching. Third, singing. If you do those things, you can die spiritually as long as the church benefits from you. Your family and people around you can as long as Tina, Ulapa, it was in music. A lot of people who are active, pleasant, who make the church feel better, the church edified, are the most poisonous to the closest people to them. Those who are in leadership positions like us, those people who speak enkonzweni abantu bamamele, and those who sing and preach, and it is those of us who are doing those things that have got to be more and more attentive to ensure that we are pleasant, not bitter. And we are not uthiwa umhlaba utheni umhlaba was unproductive. That's barren. That's the word. Barrenness means people cannot get anything from you except imengayo wena kukota neBhayibhile, but people cannot get anything that's life-giving from you and from me. Barren. And so as gentlemen, we need to ensure in Yogokubangaba, we are not just looking pleasant with all the ties and all the nice shirts and all the nice cufflinks and all the nice cars, but we are people who are not imbuing bitter experiences to other people around us. Abanye abantu abasafuna uyibona inkonzo because of how we treated them and what we did. Kukho abantu abayijongilele enkonzo bathi yo uba ubani uphaya ayondo lanto, because we have this pleasantness around us, but we do not we have the bitterness and the barrenness that are killing us. Friends, it's 4 o'clock. Let me pause for questions and comments, and then we close so that we can be done. But you feel free to enter at any point. So the message to guys is that we need to consider our automatic responses such that we deal with those that are bad. We are not defensive, we're not blaming, we're not doing, but we grow. We have a growth mentality. And the second part is that we are not spending pleasure on trying to be pleasant in public and yet poisonous in private, and barren in our productivity. So anyone who wants to comment, Mike. Khona umuntu ofuna uphefumula bethu okanye uthi ayikho yonke lento ithethayo wena uyaphazama. The message, Mama, it was for the gentlemen. ungathi xa ufika endlini uthi uvile bekuthiwani uvile bekuthiwani umyeke uza imbewu kaThixo if iyakhula izawukhula in quietness, in silence. But as long as there is an intention for us to get better, that's the most important thing.
Nyabonga, the lesson is so deep, and it's yenza uthi umuntu abe in self-introspection, because what you're talking about, it's not all about in the family only. Nasemsebenzini, in life yonke. But where do you start when you see impawu? Where do you start for this change to happen? Ngathi ukuthi ungabi in a defensive mode all the time. Ukwazi ukuyilandela, accept her right. Nonetheless, approach oyitholile yona was bad, because many a times I think you will be open up to accept, but kunalento le man usathanayithi mara le approach le no mondele ukhulume nami kanjani nawe bese nawe uyabona kahle ukuthi ayila sengidefeated ngizoba ku defensive mode nje singayi indawo. So where do you start, and how noma izen bad injalo, how do you handle that? How do you change? Because honestly sonke sinayo noma ingaba yenzeka kimi nokomunye ngiyayibona ukuthi but bengihamba ngisho kahle lento lo muntu mara u defensive nje ngento engekho. Yes how do you deal?
Ingxaki for all of us. There's no one who's better than any other person here. But there is an approach which is called a fishbone approach. Do you know that? But say as a fishbone approach, those of us about intlans, okanye fish, you take a fish uyitya in such a way that you don't allow the bones to stick with you, but you take the meat out of it. There are situations like that where you need to learn. I'm going to take what the person is saying, even if the approach is bad. You just need to do that. Because it's not always going to be possible, but lo mntu abene approach right all the time. So, yena, he or she must deal with the approach. Mna must deal with how I receive the thing. So it's always like that, because singabantu will never be perfect, and we need to have this learning attitude of growing all the time. Because if we don't have it, we're expecting perfection every time. Somebody disappointed because ayiko, abantu do not have it. So this thing has to do with Indio Bangaba. I'm the recipient. When you're the giver, when not how you give, now let me look at how I receive, so that we can grow. And maybe, if possible, talk about it. If mhlambi friend yakho, mntu osebenza naye, family member, and all of that, because in the end, the main thing is the journey of growing. You don't defend lack of growth. Uthi hayi mna ndinje ndiyaziwa. Kubona abantu abanjani? Wathi hayi ndiyaziwa mna. Buza phaa kubani uyandazi. Xa ndisenomsindo, hayi bawo siyaphuma isiciko sithi. Uqonde, there's no akho tshintsho. Ndiyaziwa mna ba ndiyathetha nje. Ndithetha nanjanini. That's a bad attitude. To say ndiyaziwa mna ndikhule kulolu hlobo. No. We're talking about growing. When you sing ukuthi I'm hurting abantu, I'm doing things abantu abangaz appreciate you, let me change. Because you see, the reason why we're doing all of these things is because we represent a kingdom of God. A kingdom that does not thrive on force. A kingdom that does not thrive on hatred and anger and all of those things. So if you can always put at the back of our mind, ukuthi njengoba silapha nje doing all of these things, what kingdom are we serving? That's where the question is. We're serving a kingdom. Fortunately, in this case, the person that they were telling was Elisha. Baya ku prophet Elisha, but the prophet, this place is pleasant, but it's bitter and barren. Because the prophet represented uThixo, iti Bible wafika prophet, and he put something into the water, and the water changed. We also need to go to Christ through prayer. Because ezinye izinto asizokwazi uzichinja noba singathetha umhla nezolo. Asokwazi uzichinja until the other person changes. Yabona. So ubona inkosikazi yami, she tells me yabona about izinto tontoni isinxibo, this and that kind of stuff. Until I get convinced, sometimes I do convinced, I know, I agree with you, let me do what you want. But I need to be convinced about some things. Yabona. So simile apho toza ukuthi ndiyabona leadership nansi ilapha ngaphambili, and they don't want to keep you longer than necessary. But may the Lord add a blessing to the reading of his word, and may the Lord bless all of us now and forevermore. Amen. Thank you. The leaders.
Amen. Bazalwane Ntini, after such a powerful presentation, I hope we've all taken note of the presentation and we've all received the fruit that we can take home. Especially as men, we are the ones who are most likely to have that, that mode of being defensive all the time, and thinking that we are right, and we've been taught now we should, stay away from that. Esikhathini samanje sizovala isabatha socela uzolila ngaphambili azosivalela, and then after that we will pray.